Students, this is chapter number 5. Here we are going to study about constructors. This is the part 1 of this chapter. So, first of all, we are going to see what is called as a constructor. Okay, a constructor in Java is a block of code similar to method. That's called when an instance of an object is created. So this constructor is similar to that of functions. Okay, the previous chapter we studied about functions. The same we are going to follow in the constructors. Constructors also a block of codes. So a constructor function has the same name as a class and do not have any return type. So in functions, the class name is and the function names are different. But here in constructor, we are able to use the same class name as a function name. But here there is no return type in constructors. Okay. Next. The class names in Java consist of compound words or phrases such that the first letter of each internal word is capitalized and rest of the characters in lowercase. Okay, so in class names, in Java, class names of the Java consist of compound words or phrases such that the first letter of the internal word is capital. So the first letter is capital letter, class name, and all the other letters are lower letters, that is small letters. A constructor function of a class initializes the instant variables with the legal initial values. Next, what is the need of a constructor? Why we are using the constructors? Okay, one of the major characteristics of Java is its close relationship with real world entities. So whenever an object is created, it must be constructed usually with legal initial values automatically without being specified by the programmer. This will immensely relieve the programmer from initializing values of objects for larger programs. So this is done with the help of a constructor of the class to which the object belongs to. So there are some characteristics of the constructors. So now we are going to see what are the characteristics of a constructor. Constructor is the member function of a class having the following characteristics. First one, it has the same name as that of the class name. So we are able to use the class name, same class name as a constructor name. It Second point, it does not have any return type. It follows the usual rules of accessibility uh, as other members of a class, and therefore access modifiers can be applied to it. So it follows the rules of accessibility as other members of a class, okay, and therefore access modifiers can be applied to it. And fourth one, it gets called automatically whenever an object is created. Next, invoking a constructor. How to invoke a constructor? A constructor function in Java is only invoked when the object of the class is created. So, the constructor function will, once the object is created, once the object of the Java class is created, the constructor function in Java will be invoked. Next, what is called as a default constructor? So, default constructor is a non-parameterized constructor that initializes data members with legal initial values. Okay, so it will initializes the data members with initial values. So what are the initial values? Byte. Default initial value is 0. Short also 0, integer also 0, and long also 0. Okay, so the initial value means it is nothing, but it will store only zeros. For the float value 0.0, yeah. double value 0.0. Character means the 0 will be inside the single quote, and boolean is false. False means 0. So this default constructor refers to a nullary constructor that is automatically generated by the compiler if no constructor have been defined for the class. Nullary means nothing. Okay, nothing will store in the default constructor. So it will initialize the values as 0, which initialize data members with 0, null or false corresponding to the data type. So already we have seen it in the table. So if the default constructor is created, refers to 0, that is automatically generated by the compiler. It is we cannot uh, we need not to initialize the values as a 0 value. The compiler will already automatically generated it as a null value. Okay. So the next one is default constructor is categorized into two, that is implicit default constructor and explicit default constructor. So the private constructor allows an object to be created only within the class where it is created. The private constructor cannot be invoked from another class. Next, constructor types. There are two types of constructors, that is non-parameterized constructor and parameterized constructor. So now we are going to see what is non-parameterized constructor. The constructor that have an empty parameter list are known as non-parameter constructor. Parameters means the values, arguments that is inside the brackets. So if it is an empty, then it is called as non-parameterized constructor. Constructed with arguments if the values are inside the brackets. Okay. Or you can see parameters. So the parameters are always called as arguments. That means the variables that we are used inside the functions. Okay. So the constructor with arguments. If the constructor is with variables, then it is called as an parameterized constructor. If the constructor is empty, that is without values or arguments or parameters, then it is called as a non-parameterized constructors. Next, a parameterized constructor has the advantage of passing different values for its instant variables whenever it is invoked. Parameterized constructor means it is having the variables. So it has the advantage that we are able to pass different values, okay, for the variables. Instant variables means the values that is defined under the class. So okay, when it is invoked. The next one is the copy constructor is a constructor that creates a new object using an existing object of the same class and initialize each instant variable of newly created class object with the corresponding instant variables of the existing object passed as an argument. So the copy constructor that creates a new object, okay, it will create the new object of the existing object and it initialize each instant variables, means the variables that is defined inside the class of the newly created object with the corresponding instant variables of the existing object passed as an arguments. Okay, this work is done by the copy constructor. Now we are going to see what is called as constructor overloading. Overloading means if we are using function overloading means if we are using a function inside another function, then it is called as a function overloading. So if we are using a constructor, see, constructor overloading. Constructor overloading is the concept of having more than one constructor with different parameters list in such a way so that each constructor perform a different task. So constructor overloading means inside the class we are using more functions, more constructors with different parameter list, means with different type of variables. Okay, with the different types of variables in such a way that so that each constructor perform a different task, so that each functions will do different calculations. Okay, but the parameters, that is the values inside the class name will be same and the constructor's name will be same, but the values used inside the brackets will be different, so that the constructor can do different tasks. Okay, the next one is the main objectives of constructor overloading is initializing object of different ways. The next one is difference between constructors and methods. This is very important. So every time they are asking for 2 marks and 3 marks questions. So the main difference between the constructors and methods are constructors are used to initialize the state of an object. Okay, then methods are used to expose the behavior of an object. Next, constructor do not have a return type. Okay, methods should have a return type. The name of the constructor should be same as that of the class name. Method names may be same or different from the class name. Okay, so the function's name will be same but the class name will be different. Here in constructor we are able to use the same class name and the constructor name as same. Constructors are invoked only when an object is created. Methods are invoked explicitly anytime. An implicit default constructor is created when the user do not create a constructor. Okay, so when we are not creating a constructor, a default constructor will automatically created by the compiler. A method has the explicitly created by a method has to be explicitly created by the user. So these are the main difference between the constructors and the method. Next, what is the use of the keyword static? Okay, so the keyword static indicates that the particular member belongs to a type itself rather than to an instance of that type. This means that only one instance of that static member is created, which is shared across all instances of the class. Next, static members. The static members are used not initial instant. The static members are not instantiated. Thus, only copies of it is created irrespective of the number of objects. Okay. So, students, these are about the constructors, and the coming part, that is in part 2, we are going to see the solved exercises of this chapter.